Good evening to one and all. I'll be starting my session shortly. However, before I begin with my session, which is for the Human Rights Council of the Indian International IIMUN USA Conference, I would like all of you to mark your attendance by writing your name, the country which you'll be representing, and the school which you are from in the comments section of this video. So I'll be giving all of you a couple of minutes of time to do that, and after that I'll be starting with my live session. So thank you all of you for marking your attendance. I'll start the session by introducing myself first of all. My name is Aman Baldia, and I'm going to be the chairperson for the Human Rights Council at IIMUN USA. Firstly, thank you so much for using your time in the evening to attend my session. The session is going to be aiming at giving you an overview of the Human Rights Council, its functionality, its history, and the agenda which we are going to be discussing in the same at the IIMUN USA conference, which is discussing the vulnerability to the sexual health and reproductive health and the sexual rights and the reproductive rights, with special emphasis to the rising wave of fundamentalism. Now I know just hearing the agenda out, it might seem a little bit too much for all of you MUNers and all of you delegates being in your high school, and thus I want to make this session as informative as possible in a manner in which it is understandable by all of you. So I'll be avoiding all the jargons which you will normally read when you go on Google to different websites to understand more about this agenda. I'll be avoiding all those jargons, and I'll be trying to make sure that this agenda is explained to you in simple language which is understandable to one and all. So I'll start off with explaining you about the Human Rights Council, for which I need to tell you quickly a brief overview of United Nations. So United Nations is a peacekeeping organization in the world, founded in the year 1945, and it has 6 principal organs which are a part of it. Now I won't delve into what these organs are, but I'll tell you the organ which Human Rights Council is related to, which is the United Nations General Assembly. The United Nations General Assembly is one assembly where all the member states, all the 193 member states of the United Nations come together and discuss issues ranging from healthcare, ranging from human rights, ranging from security, and everything which comes under the mandate of the United Nations. The General Assembly itself is further divided into 6 committees of its. However, along with the main 6 committees which are part of the General Assembly, there's also this one subsidiary committee, subsidiary body as we call it, which is very important when it comes to the working of United Nations all across the globe, which is called the Human Rights Council, which is also a part of the UN General Assembly. When I say it's a subsidiary body of UN General Assembly, I mean that it gives all its updates to the United Nations General Assembly, and it works under the purview of UN General Assembly. So that is what Human Rights Council is. As the name suggests, it is a council which maintains and which tries to ensure that human rights are not only promoted all across the globe, but are also protected. Now, what do you mean by human rights? Every human being which has been born in this world deserves certain amount of rights, certain amount of equality when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, and when it comes to the freedom and freedom of expression and all the other fundamental freedoms which are there. So that is what the Human Rights Council aims towards, where it tries to make sure that all these rights are something which are maintained. Now, the Human Rights Council was something, I'll give you a brief history of the Human Rights Council now. The council was formed in the year 2006 on 15th March, and its first session took place on 19 June in the same year 2006. This council has 47 member states. What do you mean by member states? Member states are basically countries who are a part of this council. So there are 47 countries who are a part of this council. These countries are selected for a tenure of 3 years. So every 3 years, the United Nations General Assembly elects which are the 47 countries which will be a part of the Human Rights Council. Out of this entire committee, which has 47 member states, 13 seats from the same are for African nations. 13 seats for this in the council are for Asian nations, 6 are for Eastern European countries, 8 are for Latin American and Caribbean countries, and 7 are for Western European countries. So this is the bifurcation of the 47 member states which are a part of the Human Rights Council. This council aims to make sure that when the United Nations was formed, the date when you call the United Nations was found was a date when the UN Charter was signed. And in the UN Charter itself, human rights are something which are given utmost importance. And that's why before the Human Rights Council, there was another committee which was called the UN Commission of Human Rights, which used to be there, which used to be under the purview of ECOSOC, which is Economic and Social Council. However, there were a lot of problems which were there with this council, such as the actual problems in regards to human rights which were taking place in the world were something which were not being discussed and which were many a times even ignored and avoided. There was a biasness which was shown against certain set of countries, namely Israel, where during the Israel-Palestine issue, this committee was not able to take a neutral ground there. And like that, there were many different issues which were there, because of which this committee was dissolved and the Human Rights Council came into the picture. And this time it was decided that rather than it being under the purview of Economic and Social Council, it should be under the UN General Assembly, since all the countries are part of the UN General Assembly. This council aims to make sure that people get their freedom to expression. Now, what do you mean by freedom to expression? Right now, what you're doing by clicking on like, dislike, hate, angry smiley, all these different smileys which Facebook is giving you as an option to express what you are feeling about my session right now, is a freedom of expression which you have right now, given to you on social media. Just like that, you have freedom of expression to say putting up a status on your Facebook page, or you have freedom of expression of say setting up a stage, taking a mic and saying what you feel like in an audience. That is the freedom of expression, for you to express what you feel. And that is something which this committee tries to make sure that people all across the globe get. Secondly, what this committee also aims to make sure is that freedom of belief and religion. So, taking example of India as a country, India being a secular country, here people are allowed to follow the religion of their choice. However, to make sure that people all across the globe are given this opportunity to decide what do they believe in, what is the religion which they want to follow, is something which this committee aims to make sure that is established all across the globe. May it be, say, women rights, which is going to be pertaining to the agenda also which we have. These women rights includes giving equal rights to women in every field, in the field of education, whether it be sexual rights, reproductive rights, in the field of politics, in the field of corporate world, everywhere women should be given equal rights as men, is something also which comes under the purview of this committee as such. The LGBT rights, the bisexuals, the transgenders, the lesbians, the gays, homosexuals basically, making sure that even they get their rights, which is equal rights when it comes to all these different fields which I spoke about when I was talking about women's rights as well, is something which should be maintained for them as well. So basically what it aims for, this council, is that to making sure no one is discriminated based on their caste, based on their gender, based on their sexual choices, or based on any category which is something which a person does not make a conscious choice of, is something which this committee aims to do. While doing so, this committee also has adopted a few measures to make sure that whenever it talks about ensuring that human rights are maintained all across the globe, what are the different measures which they've taken to ensure this happens? One of them is called the Universal Periodic Review. Now, what do you mean by the Universal Periodic Review? It means basically this committee on a regular basis keeps reviewing all the countries who are a part of the United Nations, not only the countries which are part of the Human Rights Council, but all the countries which are part of the United Nations itself. It keeps reviewing them whether they are able to make sure that people in their country are able to preserve their human rights or not, is something it keeps reviewing. And it also gives an opportunity to all the member states to make sure that they can also view other member states' state in terms of human rights violations, and it can also make suggestions, and it can also tell other countries that what has that country in specific taken as measures to ensure that the human rights in their country is something which is maintained. So that is also another thing which the Human Rights Council has, which is called the Universal Periodic Review. Now, before I move forward, I would like to say this one thing. As you must have already noticed by now, I have this tendency of speaking really, really fast. So if I am speaking really fast and you're not understanding what I'm trying to say, kindly comment your questions, and I have my team which is seated with me right now who will be answering to your comments, and a few comments I'll be answering via this live video session as well. So if you have any queries at any point in time, kindly comment, and I'll be making sure that I am replying to as many comments as possible in the live video as well itself, or else for sure every comment will be replied to by my team at the end of this session. So that was one of the measures which the Human Rights Council has taken, which is the Universal Periodic Review. Secondly, the Human Rights Council also has this one complaint procedure, where whenever a case comes where a certain country or a certain entity states that there's been human rights violation. Say, let's take the example of the sad crisis which is going on in one of the Middle Eastern country right now, which is Syria. So let's take the example of Syria here, where due to the entire turmoil which is going on in Syria, which I won't dwell into much, there have been a lot of violations of human rights which have taken place. People have been killed, people have been mutilated, people's right to education is taken away, right to expression is taken away, people are raped, things are done to them which you and I can't even imagine. So whenever such complaint is raised to the Human Rights Council, what's the mechanism which the Human Rights Council follows? It follows two stages, which is in the complaint procedure. In the first stage, there's something called the Working Group on Communications, which consists of 5 member states, 5 countries, who nominate experts in the field of human rights, who accept all these queries which comes in terms of human rights violation, and they try to make sure that they independently, without being under any kind of a pressure, they try to make sure that they go through, they investigate on that topic, and then they communicate whether that is something which is a proper human rights violation or not. Followed by which there's something called Working Group on Situations. So what it does is that whatever the WGC, which was the Working Group on Communication, communicates to the Working Group on Situations that this is something which is a human rights violation according to them, it goes through the entire situation, and then at the end it makes suggestion to the Human Rights Council that what are the measures which should be taken in order to stop this human rights violation which is going on. So this is what the complaint procedure takes place. This is how the complaint procedure takes place in the Human Rights Council. So I would like to take a pause right now, and I would like to ask, has everyone understood the UN special procedure, the UN Universal Periodic Review and the complaint procedure of the Human Rights Council? Any doubts about these two? Okay, someone has just asked me to repeat the last part about complaint procedure. So I know I used a couple of jargons because of which you might have not understood. So I'll just tell you, there are two teams. Team 1 is called Working Group on Communication. So what is the job of the Team 1, which is Working Group on Communication? It gets all the data from all the other member states, saying that there's been a human rights violation which has been taking place in a certain country or in a certain place, and it tries to make sure that it investigates and it decides whether actually such a situation has taken place or not. Then there is Team 2, which is Working Group on Situations. What does that do? It tries to make sure that whatever the Working Group on Communication communicates to them, it tries to make sure that that is something which is, once after the investigation takes place, it gives suggestions to the Human Rights Council that what exact measures should be taken by the Human Rights Council in order to avoid such a problem. The periodic review, I'll explain again. It basically just is a review system where all the member states are reviewed on a regular basis, and if there's any human rights violation which takes place by the member states of the United Nations, it's brought into notice of theirs and they are given corrective measures to take care of. And at the end, once the review takes place, the countries who have actually made sure that the human rights in their country is something which is preserved, they are allowed to speak in front of the rest of the committee and say that how they have taken different measures which help them promote human rights and how other countries also should follow them. Is the universal periodic review understood now? And the complaint procedure? Seeing no more comments, I am assuming that it is being understood by everyone. Great, I saw yes. So that means I can continue now. The Human Rights Council also has an advisory committee. Now, what does the advisory committee do? It provides the Human Rights Council with expertise in the various thematic human rights issues which are going on in the world. And it also acts like a think tank. So what's a think tank? Think tank is basically a group of people whose only job is to ideate and to come up with solutions to the problems which they are thrown at. So even Human Rights Council feel that yes, the member states might not be able to solve all the problems. Thus they have a think tank of their own, which is called the Advisory Committee. A couple of questions not related to what I've spoken till now, but which have been addressed till now. How to perform better in debate. Now for that, we are going to be having a specific session which is going to take place on 30th of May. So stay tuned for that. And secondly, we are going to be giving you background guides? Yes, we will be giving you background guides. In case your video is buffering, which is another comment which I just saw, do not worry. Facebook, luckily we live in the 21st century, so we have technology to be our savior. At the end of the session, this entire session can be seen by you once again because it will be saved in the videos section of our page. So don't worry, you're not going to lose on anything just in case your video is buffering right now, so do not panic. So I'm assuming everything in relation to the Human Rights Council which you need to know right now is something which I have communicated. Once again, just reviewing everything which I've said. Human Rights Council, as the name suggests, maintains human rights in the world. Was found in the year 2006, has 47 countries as a part of it. Distribution is something which I explained you. Of those 47 countries, it's region-wise. Number of seats are reserved for a specific region. The Human Rights Council has various mechanisms which involves the Universal Periodic Review, it involves the complaint procedure, it includes the Advisory Committee which makes sure that the working of Human Rights Council is taken care smoothly and efficiently. I'll move on to the agenda which we have in hand. So the agenda, I'll break down the agenda for you to understand the agenda a little better. So the entire agenda which we have in hand is discussing vulnerability to sexual and reproductive health and rights, with special regards to the rising wave of fundamentalism. So let's forget the latter half of this agenda right now for the time being, which is with special regards to the rising wave of fundamentalism. Let's try to understand the vulnerabilities to sexual and reproductive health and rights. So, when I talk about this topic, the first thing which should come to your mind is what are the sexual and reproductive health and rights which people have. So, explaining it to you in a very generic term, sexual and reproductive health and rights basically can be distinguished into 4 categories. Category 1 is sexual rights. Category 2 is sexual health. Category 3 is reproductive rights. And category 4 is reproductive health. Would not take an Einstein to figure that out, right? Yes, and it would seem to be very similar. That what's the difference between sexual right and sexual health, or reproductive right and reproductive health, and are they overlapping in nature? In actuality they are, but still there's something or the other which distinguishes one from the other. That's why they all are separate terms as such, and all these terms have actually been defined by the World Health Organization as well. So one by one I'll quickly read out the meaning according to the World Health Organization for all these 4 topics, starting off with sexual health. So sexual health is a state of physical, emotional, mental and social well-being in relation to sexuality. It is not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction or infirmity. Sexual health requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences free of coercion, discrimination and violence. Now, what do you mean by such huge terms? Very simple. Not having an STD does not mean that your sexual health is something which is fine and which has no problem. Sexual health is a broader topic than just the sexually transmitted diseases. Sexual health means that whether you are in a state of mind that when you take any sexual action, you are not being discriminated in any fashion. And if you are at mental peace as well when you are taking such sexual actions, is something which means sexual health. So basically, what it tries to say is that if any kind of sexual actions are forced on a human being, rape is the term which we use normally, it is against the sexual health of a person. And since it's something which does not have a positive mental impact on that person. Followed by which we have sexual rights. Now, sexual rights are basically the rights of an individual to choose whom does the individual wish to have as their partner. Who, as an individual, who do they want to be sexually active with, and whom do they want not to be sexually active with. Whether the sexual health care services are something which are easily accessible and equally accessible to everyone or not. All of these come under sexual rights. Now, Arav, I'm trying to be as low as possible. I hope you're understanding this part at least, which was sexual rights. Are you with me, Arav? Okay, Arav might take some time to reply. Okay, Sharon also wants me to go a bit slow, so I'll try to go even more slower. I'll repeat. Sexual health means not only not having any kind of STDs, but it also means being in the right state mentally while taking care of sexual practices. Sexual rights means that while the person has a choice to choose their partner, the person has the choice whether they want to be actively involved in any kind of sexual activity or not, and the right for the person to have access to sexual health care is something which comes under sexual rights. So basically, the right which you have to go to a counselor, go to a doctor, and the doctor treating you without discriminating you against your caste, religion, or anything, is something which is your sexual right. Now let's come to reproductive rights and reproductive health. Reproductive rights means that the right that an individual have to decide whether the individual wants to have a child or not, the right for abortion, the right to decide how many children you want to have, is something which comes under reproductive rights. It's something which is pretty self-explanatory, thus I won't indulge too much into it, and I'm assuming you are understanding this. But however, if you don't, kindly comment and I'll explain it once again. Moving on, there's something called reproductive health. Reproductive health is basically giving the person the opportunity to have a safe sex life and have the freedom to decide, the capability to reproduce. This basically discusses infertility to a lot of extent, where say if a certain individual does not wish to reproduce and would like to become infertile, the option should be given to that person as well. So these are the 4 terms together which are called as an acronym SRHR. Now you'll use this acronym quite a lot of times in the committee, and you'll see this acronym used on Google on different websites a lot of times. So what does SRHR stand for? It stands for Sexual and Reproductive Rights and Health. So these are the 4 terms which defines the entire term, which is sexual rights, sexual health, reproductive right, and reproductive health. Now moving on, so I've explained you the first aspect of the agenda right now. What are the vulnerabilities which are there in this field is something which I'll come to later on, but I've just explained you the term. What does the first half of the agenda means? Now moving on to the second half of the agenda, which is with special pertinence to the rising wave of fundamentalism. Now what do we mean by fundamentalism? This term fundamentalism means the tendency of a person or a group of people to be strictly adhering to a certain set of their beliefs. Now don't misunderstand fundamentalism with only literal religion. Many times people feel that fundamentalism has only one type, which is religious fundamentalism, which means that if your religion says that XYZ things are right, you will believe that XYZ things are right, no questions asked. And you will go to any extent to prove that the XYZ things which are written in the religious scripts of yours are right. But fundamentalism does not end there. Fundamentalism is a much bigger and wider topic. Fundamentalism in general means, for any group, may it be atheists as well, people who do not believe in any kind of religion, or there's even a term called Zionism. What do you mean by that? That people are so, say, literal when it comes to any kind of scientific discovery that anything else they are close to, any other suggestion they are close to. They just believe that what they have read, scientifically what they've seen is proven is something which is right and everything else is wrong. So thus fundamentalism as a topic, as a term, means that you believe that if you have a certain belief, you believe that you think that it's a fundamental thing which is according to you, that it cannot be wrong. So if an X religion says that eating non-vegetarian food is something which is wrong, you feel that's fundamentally right, and you can go to any extent to prove that right. And if certain religion says that eating anything which grows underground is wrong, you will go to any extent to prove that that is the only way right, and everything else is wrong. And everyone else who's not following the things which are mentioned by the religion or by the belief which an individual has, whoever does that, they are just not following the things which are supposed to be done in a right manner. So that is what fundamentalism as a topic means, as a term means. Now, yes, when you think about it in a larger perspective, when you think about terrorism as well, many a times terrorism, or most of the times terrorism, is something which is the cause of this fundamentalist and fundamentalism in specific, fundamentalist attitude and fundamentalism in specific, where people feel at times that their scriptures, religious or non-religious in nature, cannot be defied. They can't be questioned. And when that happens, what happens is that if anyone is going against what is mentioned in their scriptures according to them, because understand one thing, that all the scriptures, all the religious scriptures which are there in the world, all of them are very philosophical in nature. None of them are very literal. So every sentence which is written in any scripture of any religion can have multiple different meanings, which I'm sure if you read any scripture of your own religion as well, you understand. But what does this group believe is that whatever they have understood from the scripture is the only right thing. So anyone who's going against their belief of the scripture are the people who are doing something wrong. And this many times triggers terrorism, it triggers violent acts as well. And this is something which happens across the entire spectrum. I won't name any specific religion as such, but it is actually a case in every religion, whether it's Islam, Christianity, Jewish, Hinduism, every religion, or atheists as well. There are many cases where just to follow what they feel is fundamentally right, according to their religion or their scriptures, are something which people can go to any extent to prove. So that is what fundamentalism as such means. So I know I go really fast, so I'll take a couple of seconds time right now, couple of minutes time actually, where I'll let all of you seep in whatever data I've given till now. I've explained the entire agenda, not together, but in two halves as of now. So is everyone with me? Has everyone understood SRHR, and has everyone understood the meaning of the word fundamentalism? Only then I can go forward, because only then you'll understand what I'm trying to say next. Now, I can understand the reason why I said in the beginning of this session is that that this topic can become a little bit too overwhelming for all of you, is because of the same reason only, because there are a lot of jargons, a lot of terminologies which are going to be used, and a lot of things which are going to be used in this topic and in this committee, which are not something which we are comfortable discussing. And that is again the topic of this agenda. So the topic of this agenda is how to make sure this taboo which we have, which happens in the Indian society as well, where if I ask you right now, if I was in front of you and if I ask you right now about your sexual status, about your sexual choices, you can't speak openly about it, because we come from a very conservative society, and thus it might be a little challenging for many of the delegates who are going to be a part of this conference to speak up in the committee. But that's where the challenge lies, and that's the beauty of this agenda, where I expect all of you to forget that for the specific time duration of the committee only. Don't take me wrong here when I say this, but I would like you to forget the beliefs which you have religiously or the beliefs which have been imparted to you for the duration of those days, and think as one world. Think as humans. And think, what do you feel is right and wrong when it comes to these rights which you're going to be discussing about. Only then you'll be able to understand this agenda, and you'll be able to discuss the agenda properly. With the conservative mindset which we have, it will be very, very, very difficult for all of you to actually speak up in this committee. So I've taken this couple of minutes right now so that you could give me questions, and I have only one question by Ikta Mishra, which is, please explain fundamentalism again. So Ikta, fundamentalism, trying to make it a little bit simpler for you. Imagine that you have you are a scientist, and you've just decided you were researching on a certain topic, and you just came up with a research that frogs can fly. It's a hypothetical situation. Frogs can fly. Just because you saw one case that frogs can fly, now according to you, your belief is put in you that frogs can fly. So now what happens in fundamentalism is that because you really believe in it, you'll take in such a literal sense that anyone else who will tell you that frogs can't fly, you'll be like, you don't know, you are the one who is who does not know anything about this topic, and you should listen to what I am saying, which is frogs can fly, because I believe in frogs can fly. And why do I believe in frogs can fly? Because I've seen this one scenario, one frog, I saw the frog flying. That is fundamentalism for you. You fundamentally believe in something and you can go to any extent to prove that right. That is fundamentalism. Did you understand, Ikta? Can I move forward? By the time the video buffers for Ikta and she answers to me, as I was saying, yes, so the conservative mindset which you have, depending on the say religion which you follow, or the part of the world which you're going to be representing or coming from for this conference, because there are students from all across the globe which are going to be coming for this conference, might stop you from speaking up openly about sexual rights, sexual health, reproductive rights, reproductive health. So try to make sure that you keep all of that behind when you enter the committee room, and you speak up about whatever you've read theoretically about this entire agenda. So I've got Ikta's answers, she has understood. Vanshika's answer, what does HRC really means, has been replied by Ananya, which is Human Rights Council. It's not Human Rights Commission, it's Human Rights Council. Maintains human rights. Vanshika, if you missed the initial part of my session, kindly just at the end of the session go back to the video and see the initial part. You'll come to know what does Human Rights Council mean. Now, Pramit, that's the next point which I'm coming to. Now I'm going to be merging the two points which I've discussed till now, which is SRHR and fundamentalism. And now I'm going to be discussing about the agenda which we have in hand, which is discussing the vulnerability to sexual and reproductive health and right, with special regards to the rising wave of fundamentalism. Now, what do I mean by this? See, you need to understand this one thing, that the rules and regulations and the laws which are there for sexual rights and reproductive rights have not been same throughout the century. So, United Nations has its own UN Charter which states human rights and states sexual rights. It has also come up with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is another document which I would suggest all of you to read and go through, because that also states various human rights which the United Nations believes in and wants to promote in this world. But the thing is that these laws in different countries, United Nations is an organization which can make suggestions to different countries. Only one committee of the United Nations, which is the Security Council, has the right of making decisions which are binding on its member nations. All the other committees, what they decide are merely suggestions to the member nations. So thus, every country has their own laws as well. And these laws keep fluctuating depending on the current administration when it comes to the government, the political situation, how prominent are different activist groups at a certain point in time, and accordingly these these practices and the laws keep changing. I'll give you an example. In the United States of America, in the 18th century, abortion was something which was legal and easily accessible to women. But what happened in 19th century is that there was a wave of feminism where people started thinking that abortion, even though even whatever the situation might be, whether it's a married couple deciding abortion, or whether it's an unmarried person, unmarried woman who's deciding to abort a child, that's something which is wrong. They decided that. And then in the 19th century, suddenly there came a time where where abortion was not something which was easily accessible to people. And whoever used to abort a child was looked down upon. So you can understand this, that how in the past abortion was something which was legal, then it became illegal, and now again it's legal. So the scenario, the political scenario, the social scenario, the thought process of individuals is something which keeps differing, and according to that, the laws and practices also are something which keeps changing. Now, there are many taboos which all of you will be able to relate to, because, as I said once again, many of the countries in the Asian continent, in the African continent, have a conservative mindset where what happens because of religious fundamentalism is that many times unmarried women are prevented from accessing sexual and reproductive health services, where there are interventions which takes place from religious authorities who act as the gatekeepers of culture. So they say that no, it's not right to give sexual knowledge, sexual health services, reproductive health services to women who are not married, who are single women in nature, because they strongly believe that reproductive rights are only for married couples. So that becomes a problem, because at the end of the day, reproductive rights, if the person is of the age, if the person believes that he or she has the capability of starting a life, then the marital status should not decide the reproductive rights of that individual. Something else which you will be able to relate to is people who have STDs, the sexually transmitted diseases. The most famous ones being, say, the HIV, AIDS, hepatitis B. People who have sexually transmitted diseases are looked as sinners. They are not given equal status in the society. Now, sexually transmitted disease is like any other disease. Reproduction is something which is a part of human evolution. It's something which is not hidden from everyone else, but creating it a taboo and making it so say unaccessible for people is something which causes people not to have frank conversations when they have any kind of STDs, where people are reluctant to even open up in front of people about having an STD, where at that point in time, if you are sick, you would like your family to take care of you. STD is just another disease, and just another kind of disease, and thus you would like your closed ones to help you out at those times. And that's why discussion, frank conversations are something which are not promoted many a times because of this religious fundamentalism and this rising wave of fundamentalism. Abortion, as I said, many a time, many a places, it is illegalized, it is restricted, because of which if women wants to have an abortion, they have to go for illegal ways of abortion, which actually endangers their lives and health, because they are not being able to use the actual ideal ways of aborting a child. Many other issues which are also there, which is such as, say, this fundamentalism causes honor crimes, forced and early marriages, sexual violations of women, marital rapes, mass rapes, restrictions on women's mobility, clothing, economic and political participation, trafficking, virginity tests. Like different fundamentalist groups have different laws and different beliefs when it comes to all these topics I spoke about, because of which many a times sexual and reproductive health and rights are something which are compromised and not being followed. There's one question before I move forward, which is if human rights are for everybody around the country, then why don't prisoners are accessible to it? Vanshika, your question is very apt. Ideally, according to the United Nations, even prisoners have equal human rights, which is not followed many a times, and not only in prisons, at times of wars as well. 99% of the time, as soon as a war takes place in any region, you will see that thousands and lakhs of women are raped in that region by the soldiers of the winning side. And there's so many STDs which are being transmitted into those people there because of war crimes. So these are war crimes which Human Rights Council has to address. What you correctly said, prisoners many a times are not given human rights. Now this is something which is a very debatable topic, where many will say that no, they do not deserve it. But at the end of the day, there are certain basic human rights which every human being deserves, being born in this world. And those are something which this council as a whole tries to make sure that they uphold them. So, as you asked, Vanshika, yes, human rights are supposed to be given to prisoners as well, but it's not accessible in many places, which is wrong. Miss Seema, you asked a question about the example of USA again. The example was very simple. Earlier, abortion was legal, then it became illegal, then it became legal again. The reason why it became illegal in between, because many people started thinking, and many groups came up in being, where they said that no, according to us, abortion means killing a human being, which is wrong according to us. And because of that, because the government wants to stay in power, they had to support this cause, and they made abortions illegal. Later on, another administration came, they came up with an open mindset. They thought, no, abortion is something which is the right of every woman, and that's why they again legalized it. So what I was trying to say by the example of USA was that the sexual rights and laws are something which keeps changing with the changing demographics of the country. Dhruvi Mehta is asking, why aren't you watching the match? I'm going to be seeing the match, and hopefully India will win as well, being an Indian citizen. But continuing with the session, jokes apart, going forward, few examples I would like to give you before I end this session, which will be a little sensitive, but then again, speaking not on behalf of any religion, because I'm going to be criticizing majority of them, and not being an atheist myself as well, but yet there's something which the United Nations believes in. Starting off with Islam. Islam has this issue of genital mutilation. The genitals of children of both genders. Circumcision takes place. Female circumcision and male circumcision takes place in majority of parts of Islamic countries, and even, but there's something which is again one thing which is misunderstood, because it started in African nations which are non-Islamic in nature, but now it's widespread across many parts of Islamic groups, and that is something which is again a kind of violation. Reason being that the consent is not there many a times, but it's just because it's fundamentally thought that that's something which is the right way ahead. Remember fundamentalism, what I explained you, the belief is there that's the right way ahead, because of which this issue takes place of genital mutilation. But when you think of other religions as well, they have their own problems as well. I'll speak about Hinduism right now. Hinduism, in many parts of Hinduism, there's still child marriage which takes place. Now, when child marriage takes place, there is pre-age pregnancy as well which takes place, where girls, I would call them girls and not women, because they are they're not even adults yet. Many a times, girls 14 years old, 13 years old, 15 years old get pregnant because of having a child marriage, and they can't take in the kind of pain which a woman has to go through during pregnancy, and that's why many a times they lose their lives as well. Now, there's another kind of vulnerability today, which in regards to sexual rights and reproductive rights, which is taking place. Christianity is also not far behind. LGBT is something which, as all of you know, according to Christianity, LGBT is something which is wrong, where they feel that being gay, being a lesbian, being a bisexual, being a transgender is actually a disease. But actually, it's scientifically proven it's not a disease, it's a sexual choice which an individual is making. And thus, there should be no discrimination which takes place depending on the sexual choices of a human being. And thus, when you speak about LGBT rights, which is nowadays something which is being spoken about a lot all across, where gay marriages are being legalized in different countries. All Actually, not only gay marriages, entire LGBT marriages are something which are legalized. Now, first of all, there should not be any reason why they were illegalized earlier in the first place itself, because the sexual choice which a human being makes, you decide your own mate according to the UN Charter and according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And thus, Christianity not upholding that is another example of how fundamentalism is influencing the SRHR. Even Jewish follow the same thought process for LGBT, which is something which is another, example of fundamentalism affecting this. What I would also like to say is that many times, due to people trying to adhere to the religion and the religious beliefs that they have, basic human rights are being violated on a regular basis. Now, the problem here which arises is that not every country in the world is secular in nature, and when the country is also secular, the leadership of the country might not always be aligned towards the secular mindset, and thus all these universal laws which have been created to promote human rights, sexual rights, reproductive rights are not upheld by all the member nations. This one problem which the entire committee as a whole, I would like you to address when you meet on 15th of August in the United Nations headquarters at the IIMUN USA conference. I would like you to address this topic and try to come up with a neutral, universally acceptable law for making sure that the human rights, especially the sexual rights and the reproductive rights of people, are something which are upheld by every nation across the globe. And that is what I feel should be the aim of this committee. A lot of you had asked questions whether you will be getting a study guide or not. You will be getting a study guide made by me soon. Your teachers will be handed over these study guides, so I would expect all of you to go through those study guides. But however, that will be a short document just for a brief synopsis. I would like you to research yourself as well. Research the status of women's rights in different countries across the globe and try to come up with solutions to these problems. Because being in the UN headquarters itself, there will be no better an opportunity for you to make a suggestion which can actually be something which can become a law in the future. So, okay, don't get too influenced by me where you start disgusting these mindsets. Fundamentalism at many a times something which also is the binding factor and is required, but however it has positives and negatives, and we just want to make sure that the negatives are something which are removed as much as possible. All the questions about bauxite, Chelsea Football Club, etc. are not going to be answered here on this profile, because this was only for the Human Rights Council of the IIMUN USA conference. I hope you understood what I was trying to say, and if you did not, you can email me on my email ID aman@iimun.in, and I would be more than happy to solve all the queries which you have. I hope this session was something which was informative enough for you and you understood little bit about the Human Rights Council and the agenda which we are going to be discussing. Thank you so much for being such a patient audience. Sadly, I don't have any more time to continue this session in regards to how to research about the agenda, etc. As I said, for everything else in relation to the research, how to win best delegate and how to perform in the committee better than the others, there's going to be a specific session which will be done by the founder and president of the organization on 30th of May. So log on to that, and I hope all of you have a good evening. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.